listening to the Live, Live, Play podcast.
Guys, welcome to the Live, Live, Play podcast. I'm your host, Stephen Kinsella, and today, again, he's back. The Don is Kevin. Kevin is over in Ireland running, he ran a seminar yesterday, and did some stuff with our guys, a mini seminar with our guys today. And again, there was some knowledge bombs dropped, and the one thing I actually had a bone to pick with him over something. I was gonna go at him, but he got there before me and explained why, and I was like, shit, he's right again. But today we're gonna, firstly Kevin, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Stephen.
Number 6.
I think maybe the sixth time, but it's the sixth time.
Yeah.
So obviously we met first maybe 5 or 6 years ago, when I came to your
the old FSM, yeah.
Was it old or old?
No, just old. It just was really limited in what we had.
And we've stayed in touch, and it's good to be back again and sharing some information with your new coaches.
Yeah, and like as Kevin mentioned, over the years we've seen this. Is that? It is on. I was like, oh my god! I was starting like. But like the first seminar you did with us was a deadlift seminar. You were selling, like, literally sell a t-shirt, buy a t-shirt, come to the seminar. Yeah. You did that for a few years. You traveled around, did all that. You came back. You taught another workshop. Then you were here with Brand X. Then you did another seminar last year, and then back again. And in that time, you've literally worked with everyone that's worth their salt in strength and conditioning, powerlifting, any sort of strength. Like you studied with Mark Ruccio, you've trained with Mark Bell, you've met Ed Cohen, you've done so much. And since we last met, now you're world renowned. Which I was shocked at, because I was very, I didn't hear that first. I thought it would have been, he would have sent me a message going, just to let you know. But I suppose you never know until someone starts saying it. Which is a cool thing, because you go around, you travel the world, you literally, your whole purpose really is helping people make better decisions when they're with their clients, or helping clients make better decisions to achieve their goals. For you as a person, how does that, like, I know you said, you told me before, you want to make an impact. How do you feel after doing, like, knowing that you've helped so many people change how they help people in their gyms, and just like, how does that make you feel as a person in general? Do you get gratitude from that because you mightn't see the outcome from a lot of these people? Does it even kind of come across you at any time, or?
Yeah, so, fortunately sometimes people message me, and I've had messages from people that I've met maybe 3 or 4 years ago that tell me that they're still using things that I taught them. And that's to me makes it kind of worthwhile too. It's always feels nice when people will say thank you to you, and it's something, because I mentioned earlier on that I'm no different from other people, and that it doesn't matter how much knowledge or information I've absorbed and obtained, is that I can still be experiencing imposter syndrome. Is that sometimes I think to myself, well, they could just go and talk to Ed Cohen or Mark Bell or people like that. Why talk to someone like me? And it's just that, it's nice to get messages coming from people to say thank you, or that I really made a good impact on that. So like you said, my goal was always to try and help as many people as possible. There'll be lots of people that told you I gave them pro bono help, because of course I have to be able to survive and have shelter and food, but I'm also open to helping people as well. And that was why I wanted to try to go to so many different people, because if you go to train with someone like Rip, then what you're going to get is learning about the starting strength model, and that's great, but it's restricted in some way, because there will always be some people that are out with that model. And I think one phrase which he was known for is that you are not a special snowflake, but actually you are. Everybody is unique and individual and different. And that's why I was then drawn to working with people like James Fitzgerald, in the sense that we can say, hey, well, let's think about individual design. How does an individual design program help us? Because we are all unique, special snowflakes. We need our own program. Then we've also got another side of that again, saying, well, yes, it has the best outcome to have an individual program, but maybe not everyone can afford that. Maybe those people just need some template, but it still has to fit what they're doing. So yeah, it's all about just trying to educate myself and trying to help people as much as possible. And I feel like I've been able to do that, but I'm also not finished yet.
Yeah.
Because I think the industry is so vast and there's so many people coming online that want to actually just experience a more healthful outcome versus a intensity outcome, that I can try to help more people.
And even when you said your imposter syndrome, and we all get it at a point, but as you're becoming more like world renowned around the world, you've done seminars around the world.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure the likes of James Fitzgerald, Ed Cohen, and everyone that we would kind of like, I would look up to in regards to coaching, would have had that at some point when they were becoming, people want to listen to me, people want to talk to me. And I think there's a natural course of, as you grow and as you become better, and more people are talking about you, then there's a natural kind of order of things as your popularity as a coach rises, which I think is probably, it's the natural order, I suppose, as you go to it. But we're going to talk about specific ages and groups for training today. Before Kevin gets on his flight, we're going to have a little chat about that. So we were talking today about obviously elderly people training weights, the how you should approach it, what you're seeing, and then moving on to something that I think some people will find a little bit hard to hear, but like women and what women should be doing in regards to their strength training. But we're only giving facts, not opinions, and I give opinions, this man will give facts. So this is the beauty of it. So with regards to the elderly population, one thing that would annoy me as a coach is that I get told, I should do aquarobics or I should do this, and I'm like, no, you need to be doing more resisted training because your body's getting weaker with age. So the only way to prevent that, and from what I've learned over years, is to resistant strength training is the ultimate in regards to keeping someone muscle density and bone densities healthier for longer as we age. But then you came into, I knew that, but I didn't know why. It just made sense to me, but then obviously you explained that in very in depth today. So
just to recap on that, it would be that when we're coming to talk about people that are getting older, first of all, as a coach, you don't have the right actually to say when someone becomes a master or not, because you can't put an age on it. That would be kind of irresponsible coaching protocols, because the way where people are going to move from one training sort of type to another is going to be based upon things that we're not in possession of the data, which would be things like hormonal levels and so on. But if we're looking, at masters or the elderly, then what we'd be looking for is that those clients typically are not going to be moving towards a peaking phase. So when we're training younger cohorts, we'd be looking at sort of an accumulation phase of training, and there'll be an intensification phase to training. And if you're doing mixed modal or CrossFit, there'd also be, in addition to that, a phase that we call chaos. Now, older athletes or older clients do not necessarily need to go through intensification. They're just going to be kind of running through accumulation all the time, and certainly we should be avoiding chaos. And the main ideas here are that the way that we're going to design programs must always start with the question of what is the intent, or just why. So the why for most aging clients is that they simply want to resist the aging process. They don't want their bodies to hurt anymore. They want to have more freedom to go out and have a walk. They want to play with their grandchildren and so on. They're not looking for a peak or any type of intensity. And what we're looking for is we need to resist what would be hallmarks of aging. The hallmarks of aging, first of all, is it's a Latin word, and it's sarcopenia, and that's the death of the flesh. And that's essentially we're losing muscle mass as we age. And there's many reasons why that happens. First of all, maintaining muscle mass or gaining new muscle mass is an extremely costly endeavor for the human organism. It requires, a lot of energy. Sometimes we know that if you have to build muscle, we're looking for a caloric deficit. So it's a very, very costly endeavor in order to develop more muscle. And so we find that older people are losing a lot of muscle mass because they're expending that energy elsewhere in the organism. Also, they're losing muscle mass because as we get older, our ability to sense the nutrients that we take in is decreasing. Specifically, we see a huge decrease in nutrient sensing of protein. So your ability to create what we call a muscle protein synthesis event, so just creating and repairing muscle, is massively decreased. Specifically, we see a lack of or absorption of one of the amino acids called leucine. So you'll be looking for older people who should really be consuming an awful lot more amino acids and more protein basically than a younger cohort to have the same outcome. So we need to think about how we need to train aging people to resist, first of all, loss of muscle mass. And the way we're going to do that is via tension. So tension is anything where the body is being pulled along by gravity, and that lengthening process is being resisted, trying to pull us short again by soft tissues. So in this case, we can say muscles, ligaments, and tendons. So a tension force application is really important during the training of aging clients. So think about things where they're hanging from a pull-up bar, think about the arms in a farmer's carry or in a deadlift, something like that. We need to have an element where they're being pulled along and they're resisting that by contracting muscle. Next thing is that we need to overcome the side effect, what we call osteopenia, which is kind of like a midway point between healthy bone and osteoporosis. It's not quite at that far end yet, and it's just a loss of bone mineral density. We know that with aging clients, we find that they can fall over and easily break a bone. So we know that they're falling over because they're losing stability and balance because of loss of muscle mass and motor control. But then they're falling down, breaking bones because bone mineral density is decreased. So therefore, not only do we have to have tension for overcoming the soft tissue stuff with the muscles, but we need to have what we call a compressive force. And that's where our body is being made smaller or shortened by the force of gravity. And that compressive force is being resisted by our hard tissues, so in this case our bones. So therefore it's extremely important to have a compressive element involved in addition to a tension element. And I think that's something that we see tends to be older people avoid that, thinking that maybe they shouldn't be doing barbell squats. But top-down compression is very important because one of the biological laws is called Wolff's Law. And Wolff's Law is simply that your bones will adapt to the load under which they're placed. So if you increase the top-down loading on a bone, then it's going to adapt to that, and the bone mineral density will increase and the bone will become harder again. So this is also important for aging clients in order to help us to resist the aging phenotype, we call it, just getting older.
And then we spoke about this just before off camera. People designing kind of master's programs, and they're literally just, it's like kind of what they're doing with novices or with kids. They're just rehashing it in a different way. They're just putting a specific group together, but they're not really changing an awful lot to it.
Yeah.
Which is probably going to then start ruining, because then there'll be a lot of obviously information out there that people are getting broken in by doing the wrong type of programming. And if you were to pick, like you said, like hanging like is hang's creating tension, and then compression, so you putting a load on the body and then moving it. But we're not talking about like Olympic lifting or like being the world's strongest 80-year-old or 60-year-old or whatever. It's just about it's the little bit of resistance that will make the quality for the hour that you're working with your client to make their other 23 hours a better quality of life. It's not trying to recreate this age-old, I wanted to be an athlete and now I'm 60, so let's go. It's the quality of life, and I think that a lot of coaches will probably overcomplicate this by putting in fancy movements or skilled movements, or as you mentioned, like plyometrics.
Yeah.
For someone that literally needs to be marching.
Well,
on the
yeah,
spot.
we got to think about, I said at the beginning there, in the intent.
Yeah.
So if we're viewing training as a hedge against being older, then really our training is a form of intervention. It's a medical intervention which we're using instead of pharmaceuticals to overcome the side effects of getting older. So therefore we have to have the same ideas when we're prescribing training as we would do if we were prescribing medication, which is we need to have minimum effective dosing, and we need to have something which is broad and has a large impact.
Yeah.
So what we'd be looking to avoid, as you said, is something overcomplicated. Now that's not to say that a master's client might not do Olympic weightlifting, but they have to be in possession of the ability to perform that first.
Yeah.
And it's going to be more difficult. The very first thing we have to have, if we have a pathway which takes us from one type of contraction to another, is that they've got to have what we call motor control first. Your ability to move your body through patterns that are required to do those more complex movements. And after motor control, we need to have muscular endurance. So they're limited there by motor control, right? They're moving their body in space as they're becoming tired and not losing the shapes and patterns. Those kind of things build towards eventually, and maybe on a tier 5, we've got what's called strength speed, which is weightlifting. And it's going to be harder because as we're aging, the number of motor units that you have inside your muscle is actually decreasing. So your motor control is getting worse as you're getting older, because the number of these things are just dropping off. It's like popping little bubbles. So what we need to do to mitigate or overcome that happening is we need to try and increase the size of the remaining amount. So what we're going to do is that older clients should be doing hypertrophy type training. We need to increase the size of the muscle in order to help them to regain some motor control that they're losing by the fact that the motor unit numbers are actually decreasing.
Yeah.
So that's going to be important. So we're looking that for older clients, we're going to be doing a lot more motor control work, which may look like unilateral, so single leg, single side stuff. We're working on balance and stability, but it's got to be done at rep ranges which are going to encourage the muscle to actually grow in size, which I've already said is also difficult because we've got decreased protein sensitivity. So we need to be looking at nutrition and be doing hypertrophy rep ranges. That may be 8 to 12s.
Yeah.
Although data suggests that hypertrophy can occur at all sorts of different rep ranges, but we would usually think of hypertrophy as 8 to 12s. Because we know that the greatest indicator that we have of production of force is the cross-sectional diameter of your muscle. So the bigger your muscle is, the more potential you have to create more force. Yeah, that's always going to bear true. And like you said, we have a problem now in the industry, which is that people understand. I never believe that anybody has bad intent. I think everybody has good intents. And that's why people want to open maybe a master's class, because they've realized that maybe they need to do something different for those people. But it tends to be what happens is that a master's class just really looks like the same as the normal class, but it has master's clients in it. So that wouldn't be a master's class to me, because we need to change the training methodologies away from pushing towards intensity and look towards pushing towards hypertrophy and some aerobic work.
Yeah.
And that is also going to be the case for other special populations in your gym, such as females.
Yes, so this was interesting because even the guys were a little bit taken back by it. I know we spoke about it before, we touched on it in the last podcast, is that women are biologically different, and there is, with regard, I'm going to let Kevin speak about it more, but we need to kind of start looking at training women differently for the outcome that is desired. Now, again, the programming itself is not harmful, but we could possibly do it better and get better long-lasting results. When I first started with this, it was a bit of a shock to me, but there is significant differences, and I'm going to let Kevin explain it properly.
So that I'm to blame.
Yes.
So
Kevin Don, hashtag Instagram, you can check him out.
Basically, I think women want to be able to do the things men do.
Yeah.
And they are completely right in wanting to do that, right? We should all have, we're all born and created equal, right? And we have to do that. However, the way that we're going to go about doing that is going to be different. Because whilst women are completely entitled to equality, what we can't do is we can't treat them with privilege, which is where we say that they should just be treated the same. Women are not just small men, right? So the protocols that we're going to have in place to progress them towards being able to do the same things, such as lifting weights and getting bigger and stronger, is going to be a little bit different. Now, there's several things that are different between women and men. We've got some physiological, anatomical differences, which mean training has to be a little different. And we've also got hormonal differences. And those hormonal differences are actually going to be different, as we know, during different phases of their menstrual cycle. So they're going to move through different phases. At some phases, like in the luteal stage, we're finding that the base temperature of the female body is higher. So you may want to think about, if you were doing a sport such as CrossFit or mixed modal, as we're going to call it, at that phase, giving someone super high intensity work, like Tabata or something really hard work, may not be the best thing to do, because they're already experiencing an elevated body temperature.
Yeah.
So that could be one consideration. Also, different phases in the cycle, different hormones are released, which are to do with the rigidity or laxicity of tendons and ligaments. So they've got a little bit more mobility at certain phases than others, and so therefore soft tissues are more open to potential, maybe, for injury at certain phases. So having an understanding of that kind of thing is important, but also the idea that women are not neuromuscularly efficient in the same way as a man. So for those people who are familiar with CrossFit, there is already an example there for them, which is that the RX, or the prescribed height of a box jump, is 20 inches for a female and 24 for a man, irrespective of how tall the female is.
Yeah.
And the reason for that is neuromuscular efficiency. If you think about, just to be really simple, the connection between their brain and between the motor units in their muscles. So as they have an intent of the contraction they want to make, the ability for them to do a sudden maximal motor unit recruitment event is not quite as good. However, women have an advantage over men in the sense that their ability to do more repetitions at a higher percentage of 1 rep max is much, much greater. So you find that women's 5 rep and 1 rep max is really close. The man, they're quite far apart. So for a man to do a high percentage of work over here, it's going to be really difficult.
Yeah.
A female, no problem. So just like we're talking about the rep ranges that we'd have to do there for an aging client, we've also got the same thing with women. So with aging clients, we've got decreasing testosterone levels because they're just getting older. And women, they just have a lower testosterone level because they're not men, okay? And basically, they're not going to be able to build strength in the same way. So 3s is not really going to work, right? 5s, the same. So for women, we're looking at how do we get stronger? Well, we need to create a bigger muscle. So again, we're looking at hypertrophy rep ranges. Also doing the hypertrophy rep range where we've got just more repetitions happening, it lays in the motor pattern better. And this is how females are going to get stronger. Better,
more motor.
yeah. So we got better recruitment because we got a bit more efficient and laid in motor pattern, and also we're trying to just increase the diameter of the muscle a little bit. And if you just think yourself about the body types that we've got in the high-end athletes in mixed modal sport, is that you do have very, very athletic women, and then the men also, whilst being athletic though, are maybe only like 10 to 15 pounds bigger than the females.
Yeah.
And the reason for that is that mixed modal or CrossFit is done high repetition, submaximal load. That's hypertrophy.
And it will recruit more muscle.
And that's how women get stronger. How men get stronger is less volume, more intensity, or load we will call it in this situation, and that's when you get a physique that looks like a power lifter. So that's why we find that there's difference. So really, women should be doing higher repetitions at a more submaximal load. That's how they're going to get stronger. Again, it's important to have an understanding of where they are, within their cycle as well, like I said, because of body temperature and the rigidity of their tendons. But also, in terms of things like plyometrics, which we call speed strength movements, we find that women are possibly more open to injury of the knee. We do find there is data that women are more susceptible to non-contact injuries, and that's because of a few issues. which is the first one is called the angle of Q, is much, much greater. So you've got this bony protrusion up here on the front of your hip, that's called the ASIS, and down here under your knee where the knee tendon is just under the kneecap. If you draw a line down between those points and then another one up through the midline, the angle between the two is called the angle of Q. And what we find is because women have a wider pelvis, the angle of Q is greater. And that means that there's more pressure on one side of their knee joint than there is on the other. So women are more likely to have knee injuries for that reason. There's also another issue anatomically, which is called intercondylar notch width. So if you think about, if we drew a cartoon bone, not a boner like I drew earlier on. If you draw
that was the 18-year-old Reen had a bit of giggles over Kevin's drawings.
And so if you think about how maybe a thigh bone looks, and we know that at the end of it we have these two, bony protrusions. And these two bony protrusions at the end are the lateral and medial condyles, and in the middle there's a gap, kind of valley, and that's called the intercondylar notch. And through that, we've got a few tendons and ligaments passing. Now, the thing is that in men, it tends to be that intercondyle notch is wider. So the head of the bone is a lot more wide. There's more surface area to absorb impact. And in females, it's smaller and closer together. So their distribution of impact to the joint is much, much diminished than that of a male client. So we find that plyometric type work can also expose females to greater risk potentially of injurious outcomes than we do find in male clients because of the width of that notch there, so the bone is not able to absorb the impact quite as well. So these are some differences that people might want to think about if they're opening a program specific to females, because I am 100% on board with women training differently. So if you want to open Ladies That Lift or Barbell Babes or whatever you're going to call it, do it. But you have to remember there are not many men. So we can't do that and then just give them the men's program. And basically then what makes this a ladies program is just that there's no men in attendance.
Yes.
Because that's not the case. It has to be written. And I know that Brand X talk about this for kids, is that your coach has to be specially trained to work with kids and the program has to be written for kids. Same thing with females, same things with masters. You have to have a coach that understands the nuances of training those special populations and then applies it to a program that is specially written for that population. So we're looking at higher rep ranges, stuff like that.
So that was the two topics we really want to talk about today. It was a short podcast. 27 minutes isn't that short, but sure. So the camera just went dead. Hopefully I edited it well, that it doesn't look too bad. But yeah, so Kevin makes you sit up and think about what you're doing and can you do it better. And the intent is, from Kevin's point, from what my understanding of Kevin is, his intent of educating is to help me, my team, and whoever else he's working with to do the job better and to not have tunnel vision when it comes to working with people.
Yeah.
Would it be?
When I started, I just only thought one way. And then eventually I came to realize that there's actually so many ways of doing things. There's sometimes that I sit and I'm reading articles or looking at other people's information and then I just get upset, and I'm like, I can't do this anymore. I can't do it because there's so much information out there that what's right and what's wrong. And what I've come to realize is that none of it. So the answer is, what you have to have is you have to have a huge array of things that you can prescribe, right? Because there's no one way to move. There's no one way to program. There's no one way to fix, right? It has to be multiple things, and you have to have a background from so many different coaches and just pull all that in and together. And that's what I'm trying to do. I try to see myself as like a catalyst. So, Ripito, Mark Bell, Ed Cohen, Jason Kalipa, blah, blah, blah. Pull all of that together. Okay, now, how do I teach people to take the best of what all these other people have to offer and put that together? Because if you find yourself stuck in one method, it will become really dogmatic, and then you won't be able to help people the best as you possibly can. It just needs to be like, the most important person is the client. So you need to always do what's best for them. And that means you have to have a huge, broad education in order to be able to give the best thing to them. That's the idea. Yeah.
So guys, you can catch Kevin on Instagram. I'll put his handle up. And then I'm actually going to link all the other podcasts that we've ever done with Kevin on this podcast, so you can check out literally the evolution of what he's been saying over the years. And ever since day one, he was hitting the nail on the head and just kept on doing it and kept on coming back and learning more. Guys, please like and subscribe to the podcast. We are back with some really good podcasts coming up. Some good interviews happening. So again, like, subscribe, check it out on Podbean, YouTube, and on Spotify. And we are done.
You're listening to the Live, Blitz, Play podcast.